Hi, I'm Hal Lindsey, and this time I'm coming as your watchman on the wall. I believe that things are happening so fast in pulling together the world powers, the spheres of power that the Bible predicts will rise just before the final 7 years called the tribulation that ends with the return of Christ to the earth. Things are happening to fit into that so rapidly. I think it's important to review this. For some, it'll be original, but for others, it'll be a review, but a very important one. Now, Daniel is the one who originated the great prophetic long-term panoply of views of continuous world powers. As a matter of fact, beginning with Daniel chapter 2, Daniel got a revelation of the world Gentile powers that would rise to world dominance from his time all the way to the second coming of Christ. So that covers an enormous bit of history. He received a vision of a great statue. There are 4 different metals that were in this statue, and each one is identified as a world kingdom that would succeed the previous one. There are 4 successive kingdoms that would rise. Then in Daniel chapter 7, he got a further revelation about that same subject of the rise of Gentile world kingdoms. And this time they're in the form of a composite beast. Each one of them is a different one, but a composition of different wild animals that would make up the characteristic of that kingdom. And when he goes through 4 of those kingdoms, he brings out very clearly that the first kingdom would be Babylon, and then we learn from identification in Daniel chapter 8, the second kingdom would be the Medes-Persian Empire that would conquer Babylon. The third kingdom would be the Greek Macedonian Empire headed by Alexander the Great. And the fourth one that was succeeded, the only other great Gentile power that would rise up until the coming of Christ, would be the Roman. The Roman took over what was left of Alexander the Great's conquest and extended it. Now, he describes these 4 beasts in the first part of chapter 7 of Daniel. Then the interpreting angel begins to explain more elaborately to Daniel what these symbols represent. He says, "These great beasts, which are 4 in number, are 4 kings who will rise from the earth." Now, the word in the original Hebrew for king also means kingdom. You have to determine by the context which it means. Sometimes it means both. I think in this case, it means both. A king would rise and his kingdom with him. So these are 4 kingdoms that would arise from the earth. He goes on to say, "But the saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, for all ages to come. Then I," Daniel speaking, "then I desired to know the exact meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with iron teeth and its claws of bronze, and which devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns." This last beast it's a terrible sight, I'm sure, but it had 10 horns. And it says, "which had eyes and mouth uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance than its associates. And I kept looking, and that horn was waging war with the saints and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the Highest One, and the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom." I want to point out here that God says there are only going to be 4 great Gentile kingdoms from that time until the second coming of Christ. The 4th kingdom, however, has a final phase. It rises as a great kingdom, but then we'll see in a moment that the 10 horns represent the final phase of this kingdom. And I'll point that out in a minute. But as Daniel said in Daniel chapter 2, he said these 4 kingdoms would have authority over the whole earth. Now, we've seen them come and go. We saw the Babylonian Empire was a great, mighty empire. The city of Babylon was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Medes-Persian Empire became an even more powerful kingdom and took over Babylon. In fact, it took over in one night the city of Babylon, which they said was invincible. What they did was they diverted the Euphrates River that ran through the center of the city of Babylon. They diverted it and dammed it up as the sun was going down, and the water stopped. And there were great bronze gates that went down into the water, where the water went through the city, 2 of them, one on each end. And they didn't notice that the water receded. And while this was receding into the night, there was a great party that the king of Babylon was throwing, and he brought out some of the stolen implements they had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, and they were drinking toast to all of their gods with them. And suddenly a hand appeared and wrote on the wall, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. That meant weighed in the balance, found wanting, divided. And when Daniel was called in to interpret it for the king, he says, your kingdom has been weighed in God's judgment, and it is divided. Tonight it will fall, and you will not see morning. And it was just after that the water stopped, and the great mighty armies of the Medes and the Persians marched under the bronze gates where the riverbed was into the city, and the city fell in one night. That despite the fact that they had walls around that city that were over 300 feet high, and so broad at the top that 5 chariots could be driven around the whole city on the top of the wall. So what God predicted happened. And then the Medes and the Persians took over, and they were extended until the rise of a young Greek. It was actually a Macedonian upstart. He was one of the Greek tribes, named Alexander the Great, arose. And you know, Daniel chapter 8 predicted very carefully what that would be. In Daniel chapter 8, it's amazing. He said, and he's explaining some symbols that were at the beginning of this chapter, again, the interpreting angel. And it says, and behold, I'm going to let you know what will occur at the final period of the indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end. The ram which you saw with 2 horns represents the kings of Medes-Persia. Now, when Daniel got this vision, the Medes and the Persians had just taken over Babylon. And he says, and the shaggy goat you saw represents the kingdom of Greece. And the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. The Medes and the Persians had just taken over Babylon. But Daniel was able to, by this vision, predict that the Greeks would conquer the mighty Medes-Persian Empire. And it would be when the first king of all Greece would rise and come and conquer them.